This is a public service announcement to all course creators out there. The online space, especially content and messaging, have been shifting and shifting fast. If you've been unheard for more than 6 months, then you need to listen to this episode if you don't want to get left behind. So keep listening. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. So this episode is a public service announcement from me, Brandon Lucero, that content, it's changing. Content is shifting. The society we live in is changing. The way entrepreneurship is going is changing. The way messaging is going is changing. And I need to do this public service announcement because not a lot of you guys are changing with it. And it's causing a lot of problems, especially inside your content, your messaging, your sales. And really what it comes down to is that there's a massive flood of people coming in, especially with all the stuff that's going on right now with COVID. There's more people that are aware of online education. So if you're a course creator, a service provider, or program developer, this episode is going to be a major announcement to you. It's going to be, to some, a major shift in the way that you're doing things, but it's a necessary thing in order to thrive in what's happening right now. Because like I said, COVID and all these things going on have forced people to stay indoors, has forced them to start looking for other ways to make money. It has forced them to find other forms of entertainment. It's forced them to go find workout routines, how to cook online, how to do yoga, how to do all of these different things that they used to do offline and now do it online. Which means there's a massive amount and a huge flood of customers coming in, but with customers is going to come competition. Now, this shift and this change has already started. It's been going on for the last 2 years. And you might not have noticed it all. And now that change is going to be on hyperspeed. We have a massive flood of competitors coming in, and you might have already seen that. And if you haven't, well, get ready for the next 9 months. And if you don't start shifting now and you don't pay attention to this episode right here, your business might start to suffer. Whether you are at a 6, 7, or even 8-figure level, or if you're someone who's just starting out. But if you listen to what's going to happen in this episode and what I'm going to walk you through in this episode, you're going to understand things that no one else in your space will understand. You're going to have an advantage because you're going to understand the deep layers of content, the deep layers of messaging, the deep layers of sales that most can't see, that most are invisible to. And right now, the biggest problems right now, and I can just tell you, I'm going to list a couple problems. And if any of these problems are you, just even if it's one of them, then I know you're suffering and not adapting to the change that is happening right now. So the very first one and the most important one is that you've been really consistent with your content. And I don't care if it's video. I don't care if it's posting on Instagram. I don't care if it's podcasting. I don't care what vehicle you're using to get your message out there, but you're doing it and you're consistent and you're doing it over and over again. And there's little to no growth. People aren't paying attention to it. The audience isn't growing. The sales aren't there. Or what's even worse is you seem to get some kind of traction with the audience, but then they don't convert. They don't buy. And then you hear things from other content, or not content gurus, but just gurus, entrepreneurs that tell you, you just got to be consistent. And then eventually over time, you'll build an audience. Well, how long do you have to be consistent for? How long are you going to continue doing the same thing over and over and over again? Look, the shift has already started and it's on hyperspeed now. If you aren't getting the results you want, if you aren't seeing growth, if you aren't seeing any of that stuff, you're not adapting to the shift and you're getting left behind. And you can continue getting left behind if you want, or you can adapt. The next one is that no one resonates with you. Maybe you are getting some kind of results. Maybe you are getting some kind of traction. Maybe your downloads seem to be increasing on your podcast. You're getting views on your video. But there's no likes, there's no comments, no responses. It's almost like people are watching it, but no one's really paying attention to it. They hear it, but they're not listening to it. So this could be in the form of like doing videos and there's no shares, there's no comments, there's no whatever. Doing a video on YouTube, no comments on the video, no likes. Doing a podcast episode and having a call to action and no one taking you up on that call to action, no one leaving reviews. These are all signs of you doing content with no one resonating. And if you haven't heard from people, wow, that was great content, or wow, that blew my mind, or holy moly, I've never thought of it that way. Well, you're not adapting to the shift going on right now with content. The next one is no one's really paying attention. You're putting out all of this stuff and you're not even getting the views or the downloads at all on any of your content. And whatever you are getting is so minimal that it almost feels like you're wasting your time doing content, even though you know content is how to build the audience. You almost feel like you want to get to the top of the mountain and just scream because you know your service is good, you know your product is good, you know your course is good, but no one's paying attention, no one's listening. And you just want to climb to the top of the mountain and scream, I can help you. And then you're sitting there wondering, well, how consistent do I have to be and how long do I need to be consistent before I start getting traction? You should be able to get traction within a month of putting out content if you adapt to the shift that's happening right now. If you can adapt to the shift, traction should be almost instant. And we'll talk about how that happens and why that happens. But these are all problems and symptoms of you not adapting to the shift that's happening right now. And what's going to happen is that the competitors start to come in, you're going to get buried deeper and deeper and deeper into this field of content. Online content is exploding right now. There's never been more online content consumed in the last 3 months than any other time in this world. And it's all happening right now. And you have the ability, the chance, the opportunity to shift and take advantage of it. But you have to change. You have to stand out. There has to be something different about you, your content, about you, your brand, so that you can get someone to come over and to buy. So those are all symptoms that you're probably experiencing. And again, the awareness, and I don't want to put you into fear or anything like that. I just want to kind of give you a little bit of a reality check, because you have to understand at the same time, there's a massive amount of competitors coming in, or not competitors, well, competitors, but customers coming in. So yes, more competitors are coming in, but at the same time, more customers are coming, which means more opportunity exists for you if you could take advantage and stand out. And we'll talk about how you do that and why it's so important. Like I look at my wife, who had no idea how to work Zoom, but now has been forced to learn Zoom because my son doing online classes and all the stuff online school because they can't go back to school. And she's like a Zoom wizard now. 5 months ago, she had no idea what Zoom even was. She thought it was like Skype, she knew what Skype was and she kept referring it to Skype. And now she knows what Zoom is, how to use it and all of this stuff, right? Online education. She wants to take classes at masterclass.com and with all the celebrities giving their courses. The awareness is almost publicly known of online education now, where it didn't exist before. When I tell people what I do, I just tell them I do social media because they had no idea what a course was. They had no idea, like, what? An online course? Like, what? What are you doing? What are you talking about? A program? What are you talking about? But now when I tell people, oh yeah, I have an online course teaching marketing, they go, oh yeah, that makes sense. So the awareness of all of this stuff is opening up, which is a good thing and can be a bad thing. So the problems are, and one of the reasons why you guys have those symptoms is that we hear things like vulnerability builds connection, be authentic, just push out more and more content and be consistent. You have to add value and you got to teach, give away your best stuff for free, survey your audience and give them what they want. And there's such a lack of education out there on how to communicate, how to properly say something, or how to properly create content so that it is delivered in a way that plays into how the human mind processes information. Most people don't realize this, but a lot of our thoughts and things that we believe to be true and how our reality is formed is all subconsciously driven. Meaning someone will say something, it gets automatically processed by our subconscious without us actively or consciously thinking about how do we want to react to this, or how do we want to think about this, or what's really happening. It's just boom. And then we move on with our day. We never think anything about it. And that's what happens when people are consuming your content. People consume your content and they make a decision automatically, just put in their head, this is great content. This is not great content. I love this, or this is not entertaining. They don't actually think about it. And you do the same thing. Like, look at this podcast episode right now. Did you actively sit down and go, wow, this is really engaging. Wow, this is really whatever. Wow, I really like, why do I like this so much? Oh, what's going on here that I really enjoy? No, the decision of whether or not you even like this episode was automatically put in your head, and a thought appeared of like, wow, this is really good, or it's not really good. And the reason why that's so important is because if you're not properly communicating in the way the human mind processes information, people are subconsciously going to have a decision in their head. They're going to believe that decision. And really what they're doing is they're forming a belief without realizing they're forming a belief. That belief then becomes the reality. And then they have this reality about your content, or this version of reality about your content. So if you're not properly communicating in the way the human mind processes information, you're already at a major disadvantage. So let's go through these really quickly, because I want to get into the solution and how to fix all of this. So vulnerability, we say be vulnerable, be vulnerable. We hear that all the time. That's how you build connection. That's how we do all this stuff. You got to be authentic. And yes, it's true. But the problem with that advice is it's either 100% or nothing, right? So people go like, you got to be vulnerable. And so everyone starts being vulnerable. You start sharing about your day. You start sharing about the fight that you got with your wife, or the divorce you just went through, or this and that, and blah, 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 blah. And what's happening is when you're vulnerable, being vulnerable alone doesn't build the connection. Because let's just say I did get a divorce. I've been with my wife since I was 15 years old, but let's just say I did. And I shared that with my audience. Like, what does that have to do with messaging, business, or entrepreneurship? Unless there's a lesson there that I learned that I can share, it makes people feel sorry for me. I get sympathy. I come off as a victim. That's not the connection. I mean, maybe it is some form of connection, but it's not the connection I want inside my business. Vulnerability is the vehicle that releases the things that build connection. And if you're strategic with what you're vulnerable about, you can build a really solid connection. But just saying vulnerability and being vulnerable in your content has nothing to do with building connection. It's not vulnerability. It's what vulnerability is releasing that builds connection. But we hear that advice all the time. So now we have everyone trying to be authentic and vulnerable and sharing all of this stuff. And then you either do form the connection, but it's the wrong type of connection, because now people feel sorry and sympathy for you versus you coming off as a leader. But if we are vulnerable about the right things, like I tell the story about how I was $40,000 in debt when I started my company and how I went through it and came out the other side. That was me being vulnerable about something I was insecure about, which was, being $40,000 in debt. But I told it from a state of empowerment. I told it from a state of not insecurity, because I'm fine with it now. So you got to be strategic with it. The next one is content first. People go like, put out content. We hear it all the time. And we don't take the time to realize that content's just the vehicle. Like there's one person who can put out content and it's really good. And there's someone who's putting out content on the same topics, the same amount of content, but they get different results. Why? It's because of the way they're communicating. It's the message. It's the messaging behind the content. And hardly anyone ever takes the time to dial in their messaging. They just hear content. So they go do content. And they're like, why isn't this growing? Why? I'm being consistent. I'm doing all this stuff. Why isn't the audience growing? Because the audience isn't resonating with your message, because you never took the time to create a message, or your content is so scattered on so many different topics. No one knows what you stand for. No one knows what you actually do, because your goal is just to try to get followers, and you just shotgun content all over the place without having a consistent, concise message that plays into how the humans process information, and people know clearly what it is that you do and how you do it and why you're different. That should all be happening in your content, but that only happens if we don't focus on messaging first. The next one is how-to content. We hear add value, teach, educate, give your best stuff away for free. And although, again, that stuff can help. And by the way, guys, all the stuff I'm talking about can help. It can. But the problem is everyone's just like, this is what you have to do. So everyone just goes and does it 100% to the full. And if we do 100% how-to content, the problem is that, like I said, there's so many competitors coming in who just want to teach and give things away for free. And you're not the only one with your zone of genius. So when you have 100 competitors coming into your niche who are all teaching the same how-to content, relatively the same, so I'd say 70% the same content as you start to blend in. And if anyone does succeed with how-to content, it's not because they gave the best tutorials. It's not because no one's sitting there going like, I follow this person because they give the most killer, amazing testimonials. Like, I'm going to share this. Everyone needs to follow this testimonial or this testimony tutorial. It's amazing because it's not the steps. It's not the tutorials. It's not the information. If you're succeeding with how-to content, it's because of other things going on. They like your personality. They like your sense of humor. Maybe you have kids and they have kids. They're connecting on other things. We have to lean into that because that's where connection is really built. It's on beliefs and identity. We'll talk about that in a second. The next one is survey your audience. So we hear survey your audience over and over and over again. Give your audience what they want. And the problem with that is now your audience dictates your message. You have no message because you're literally just saying, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? Okay, I'm going to do that. Because you want to try to quote unquote serve your audience. Again, that leaves a very scattered message. No one knows what you actually stand for. And you don't really have a message because you let your audience tell you what to do. There's a difference between that and then creating a message so powerful that people are enrolled into the message. They go, wow, I love this person. I love what they stand for. They don't feel like I need to tell them what to do because they just love what you're already saying. And the other problem with surveying your audience is that if you're doing the wrong type of content, attracting the wrong audience in the first place, all you're doing is further attracting the wrong audience because you already attracted the wrong people in the first place that you don't want to work with, that aren't in alignment with your purpose. And then you listen to them on what they want and you do more of it, you're just going to attract more of the wrong people. And the next one is a lack of communication or understanding communication. So one of the biggest things that I see is people just state things as if they're facts and they're things that they believe. And then they try to explain why they're right. And then they move on. They think that that's taking a stand, but there's a lot of things we can do. So like, for example, a lot of people will say things like Instagram's not a business, and they'll say like, here's why, without actually taking the time to back it up. So if you said something like, Instagram is not a business, look at, or let's do this. Let's do a launch is not a business. So we hear that all the time. Like if you launch, you don't have a business. And we hear that all the time. People say like a launch is not a business. And then they just move on and they go like, cool, I took a stand. My content's great. And it's like, no, it's not. Because if someone didn't believe that, you didn't persuade them. You didn't shift their perspective at all. Zero. You just stated your opinion. You moved on and you didn't take the time to show them a better way or explain why. And so if I said a launch is not a business, look at every Fortune 500 company. They all know how much money they're going to get month after month, exactly where the sales are coming from, and they have projections. Can you do that with a launch? No. So if the top Fortune 500 of all the Fortune 500 companies are doing that, why aren't you doing that? And then in that moment, what I did is I stated something, I backed it up to get people to go like, oh, wow, never thought of it that way. And what that does is it starts to shift perspective. People go like, wow, my mind's really blown, or like, holy moly, I never thought of it that way. When you can shift people's perspective, you get them to see things differently. You shift their reality. And that's really powerful content. Subconsciously, what starts to happen is like, wow, like what else does this person have to say? Oh my God, that makes so much sense. Wow, that's mind blowing. And if we look at any book written, on Simon Sinek's one of my favorites, this is what they do. They state something, they back it up, and there's different ways to do that. There's slide of mouth patterns. There's different communication styles, language patterns you can do, and rules that we followed to be able to do that. But most people just teach, and then they either overwhelm their audience or they trick their audience into thinking that they have everything they need. And they don't actually take time to realize, here's what my audience is, here's what they believe, here's how we shift perspective, here's how those beliefs are causing suffering in their life. And they don't do any of that stuff. And then they wonder why their content's not resonating. It's because subconsciously, everyone is just going, nope, don't need that, don't want it. So let's talk about the solution. So we've obviously been doing content for a long time, a lot of years. We've worked with a lot of people in the space, everyone from James Wedmore, Carrie Green from the Female Entrepreneur Association, Caitlin Batcher, Rick Mulready, Stacey Tuchel, Mel Abraham, Jim Thornton, and the list goes on and on and on. And what we've done is narrowed it down to 4 things that we have to focus on in order to start to shift our content and our messaging. And I'm going to speak to you guys from the perspective of a 7 and multi-7 figure thinking mindset. And the reason why is because if you want to get, even if you're just trying to get to 6 figures, do you think it's faster to get to 6 figures if you're trying to become a 6-figure entrepreneur or if you're trying to become a 7-figure entrepreneur? Probably if you're aiming for 7, you'll hit 6 a lot faster. But this is the way that 6-7 figure entrepreneurs think. This is the way they think about messaging. This is the way they think about content. And this is why we work with a ton of them. And I can always tell how much money someone makes by the problems they perceive they have in their side of their business. Because the same things a 7-figure or multi-7-figure person thinks is problems is not the same thing as a six-figure. And so what I want to do is I want to break down this process, because if you want to have a 7 or multi-7-figure business, or even if you have those types of businesses and your content's broken, these are the 4 things that you need in order to get it working. So we're going to talk about messaging and we're going to talk about content. Okay. So the first thing, and this is our Video 4X methodology. This is what we've developed over the last couple of years that has gone into companies and fixed messaging, fixed content, whether it be video, podcasting, whatever it is. So here we go. Step number 1 is the vision and the impact goal. You need to have a vision, impact goal and the vision goal. And so, and revenue goal. So impact and revenue goal. And I know most of you are going like, okay, great. Another goal setting thing. Why do I need that? Blah, 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 blah. Well, at the end of the day, you're going to end up somewhere in a year. But if you don't have a vision or know what that looks like, you have no control over where that's going to go. And then you have nothing to monitor your results by. So if you know you want to hit 1 million views by the end of the year, you can actually monitor that month after month after month to see if you're on pace to do it or not. And if you're not on pace, you start to look for adjustments. But if you don't have that goal, then you have no idea whether or not you're on pace or on track or you're seeing improvement or any of that stuff. Now, we want the impact and we want the revenue goal. And one of the reasons why is because if you have it and you start there, you actually end up there. But the only reason you end up there is because you started there. And the reason why, the way that works is you get to monitor, you get to set up goals, you get to work backwards. Great. We want to hit 1 million views and $1 million in revenue. How does that look? What does the steps look like? How many sales do we need? How many views do we need per month? Do we need to change the pricing of our programs? Do we need to change the messaging around? And once you know where you're going, you start to work backwards. You have very measurable things. You give action items on what to do. And because of those goals, because of those metrics, because of those action items, you actually hit the goal. But you only hit it because you started there. So it's where we start and where we end up. Okay. So obviously inside of our Video 4X method and program, we have a more detailed process to go through that is going to help you guys with that. But for now, just know that the impact and vision goal, impact and revenue goal are really important. And when we say impact goal, it could be things like views. It could be things like people served, stuff like that. But both of them go hand in hand. The more revenue we make, the bigger impact we can have. Number 2 is impactful messaging. And this is really probably our biggest pillar, the biggest thing that we focus on. Messaging is our jam. Messaging is where we spend most of our time. So I'm going to go through a couple of the things that you guys can do now to help you with impactful messaging. But again, this goes back to the lack of communication. People don't understand or know how to speak and communicate in the way the human mind processes information. And this is done in a lot of different ways. Like I'll give you an example. If I was looking at someone's offer, I'll give you an example of something we did. Back in the day, we used to sell courses, a course called Local Video Academy, and we sold it for $1,000. It was $997. And we offered a 6-pay option with it. So 6-pay of $197, which came out to a total of right around $1,200. So we would present the offer to someone and we would say, hey, it's $1,000. If you guys want a payment plan, we don't really want to offer it, but we're going to offer it as a favor. It's 6 by $197. We got so many people emailing us, telling us, why would you take advantage of people? Obviously, if they need a payment plan, they can't afford it. You're taking advantage of people that don't have money and yada, yada, yada. How dare you? Blah, 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 over and over and over again. So we switched it up. So all we did is we said, you know what, guys, here's Local Video Academy. The payment plan, the price of the program is 6 payments of $197. So go ahead and enroll now. It's 6 payments of $197. However, if you're someone that wants to just pay off the entire balance now, we're going to give you a 20% discount. It's the same thing. It was the same program, the same pricing structure, but the way we communicated it shifted. And you know what happened at that time? It was people started thanking us. They started thanking us for giving them a discount. Why? Because we were now communicating in the way the human mind processes information, subconsciously. Subconsciously, they perceived it as a discount, where subconsciously the other way before, they perceived it as us taking advantage. Same thing, same program, same modules, same videos, same price points when it's all said and done, just the way it was communicated. And there's an art form to it, and people don't take that into consideration with their content. I don't want you to change around your message. I don't want you to change around your tutorials. I don't want you to change around any of that stuff. I just want you to change the way in which you're communicating that stuff. Like you saw in that example there, it shifts everything on a subconscious level. That's why impactful messaging is incredibly important. It's a skill that's going to be valuable no matter what business you go into, whether it's local business, an online business, or whatever. It doesn't matter. So some of the things, just some quick tips for you guys, is backing things up. So you never want to just state something and then move on. So like I gave that example of a launch is not a business. I looked at, okay, what's a scenario I can explain right now that people are going to realize, like, wow, that I never thought of it that way. They're totally right. And we get that head nod effect where they're like nodding their head like, wow, yes, that makes so much sense. So we don't want to state things that we believe and then move on. We need to back it up in a persuasive way where people go like, wow, I never thought of it that way. And one of the ways we can do that are using slide of mouth patterns. So if you guys don't know what slide of mouth patterns, there's 16 of them. You can go and Google them. It takes a while to learn them. We have them inside of our program, the Video Forex Effect. But really what they are is they're designed to discredit beliefs or help shift perspective. The other thing is angles. So there's a lot of different ways to teach something, but what's a unique angle that you can take and explain something in a way that people haven't heard it before? For example, we wrote in an email to our email list pretty recently about a training we were doing called The Content That Influences. And it basically walks people through 3 types of content that they could be doing in order to take advantage of the shift, which are thought reversals, connection, and what to do videos. So I had to look at that and go, okay, what's a unique angle I can take that's going to get people to pay attention, but also positions this training as the solution? And that's before we write any copy, before we write any videos, I'm always looking at what's the objective and what's the angle that I can take that people are going to resonate with, that they haven't heard before, that's going to end with them wanting this training. And so in that training or in that email, the angle I took was a very similar angle that we're doing in this podcast, which is things are shifting. And there's 3 major norms that have been taught that are actually causing you to suffer and remain unheard. And that was a unique angle that we took. And I could have took a lot of different angles. I could have said something like, here's how to grow an audience fast, or here's how to get the most engagement you've ever gotten on any of your content. And I could have gone that route. But always looking for angles and knowing what the objective is when you're writing or creating content is really important. And a lot of people will create content with a million different objectives. They'll do a podcast episode and the objective is to leave a review and then to go opt in for this thing and then subscribe and to do all this stuff. There's always got to be one clear objective so that you can craft the content to that objective. And people don't really do that. They just try to quote unquote add value and build an audience and do all this stuff and no consideration for the objective at the end. And the 2 most important things with impactful messaging is beliefs and identity. And if you have the wrong audience and you have the wrong people in your audience, guarantee you're not focusing on beliefs or identity. If people haven't told you, wow, that blew my mind, well, you probably haven't focused on beliefs. So I'll just give you a couple quick tips here. For example, if I was to create a video and I titled it, "Parents Make the Best Entrepreneurs," who do you think is going to resonate with that message? Parents, right? And more specifically, parents that are entrepreneurs. So I can literally put identities in my content, my titles, and my language to attract the specific person that I want. And again, most people don't do that. What's one of the best ways to stand out? Understand your beliefs, what beliefs you support, the beliefs that are causing suffering in people's lives, and remove them from those beliefs so they are removed from the suffering. Beliefs are everything. And I could do a whole podcast episode on beliefs, but I'm just going to leave it at that. Thought reversal videos are about shifting people's perspective, shifting their beliefs, getting them to see things in ways that they've never seen things before. And if we look at people like, I think his name is Kerwin Ray. I think he's an Australian. He's like basically the Australian Gary Vaynerchuk. Or even if we look at Gary Vaynerchuk and you look at their content, it's very focused on beliefs and identity. Yes, there's how to. Yes, we want that type of stuff. But even the way we teach needs to shift. Even the way we teach and do our tutorials needs to shift to be in a way that humans process information. Now, then the third thing is a deployment. What's the strategy? And we call this the synergistic strategy. How do we take one effort of recording content and distribute that so that it goes onto Instagram and YouTube and Facebook and all of them. And so they work together, or podcast, So right now we're filming a podcast. I'm incorporating thought reversals, connection pieces, and what to do pieces, try to at least in every single podcast episode. So the full podcast episode goes up onto YouTube. Then the audio gets broadcasted over onto our podcasting platform. So it goes to Libsyn, which distributes it to iTunes and Stitcher and all those other places. And then our team cuts up the main episode into smaller clips that we can now use on Facebook and Instagram or IGTV. But it's one effort. It's one effort that is now distributed to multiple platforms, hitting people in multiple ways. And then, if we want to take it a step further, we then run that content as through play campaigns on Facebook. So now we're getting really cheap exposure and we're building remarketing audiences while we're building our email list. So with one piece of content, with one podcast episode, not only am I going onto all platforms, or not all, but most platforms, I'm getting a ton of pieces of content. I'm running it as a through play campaign. So I'm building up remarketing audiences. I'm getting people on my email list. I'm getting subscribers on YouTube, more followers on Instagram, followers on Facebook. And so I'm building up all of these assets from one effort. This is what I call a synergistic strategy. It's how do we get the maximized reach and the maximized benefit with the littlest amount of effort on my end and my team's end? How do we streamline the whole process? So this is what synergistic strategy is all about, is doing all that stuff and building these assets that work together. Because now if I have a Facebook remarketing audience, I can run an ad to get them to now join my email list. Or if they're on my email list, I can get, email them an Instagram post to go follow us on Instagram. So it's a synergistic thing where we start to get people experiencing us all over on the internet. And then the last and the final one is workflows and hands off. And I think this is the biggest one especially for a lot of brand new entrepreneurs is, okay, great. We understand Brandon synergistic strategy, but how do we produce all of that stuff? How do we set up the team? How do we set up the systems? How do we do all of that stuff so I'm not doing it myself? Because here's the deal, guys. If you're trying to do what we do and you're trying to do it by yourself, you're going to spend 40 hours a week just trying to film, edit, put it together, chop up, export, post online, all of that stuff. And there's a lot of ways that you can build a team and build a system internally and externally, in-house, overseas. There's a lot of options out there. So we have a team of both in-house people that are local and also overseas. And when I got started, I started overseas. I went to onlinejobs.ph, found a video editor, and they were on retainer part-time for like $200 a month. And they were doing all of our content. So if you can set up the system, what happens is you just show up to film your content, then you just upload it to Dropbox and your team takes over and you're left with perfect videos every single time. And it doesn't even have to be video. It could be podcasts. It could be blog posts. It could be graphics. I know, like, even inside of our podcast episodes, our team pulls out quotes. They turn those into quotes that we use as graphics on our Instagram. They look for concepts. They look for me talking about thought reversal concepts. They turn those into graphics, and turn that into Instagram content. We have a whole process. But the idea here is that I'm not involved in that process. And the reason why is there's a system, there's a workflow. And it doesn't matter what level of business you're at, even if it's as simple as you just doing one weekly video, there's a simple process that you can do to have someone overseas edit your content, someone else post it, and build out that system and that process so that's hands off for you. So all you're doing is focusing on creating the content, then handing it off to your team. And I know that because I was dead broke when I started this. And the way that I looked at it was, okay, great. Content's taking me 15 hours a week. So that's 60 hours a month that I'm spending on content. And if I can hire someone for $4 an hour, that's going to cost me $240. And the question you really need to ask yourself is, if you took that 60 hours that you were spending on content a week and spent it just on sales and marketing, could you make more than $250? And the answer better be yes. Even if you had to go work a job at $10 an hour, you're going to make $600. Even if you had to walk door to door selling water bottles, you're going to make more than $250 or $240. So you're losing money by not building out the system, by trying to do it yourself. You're losing money, you're losing growth. And again, this is not a time to sit here and wait and procrastinate, because the competition is coming. It's already started. They were already The awareness was already going. The shift in content has already started. It's just on hyperspeed now. So again, this is my public service announcement to you guys that content is changing drastically. Online business is changing drastically. Procrastinating, waiting, and doing the same thing over and over and over again is just going to keep you stuck. It's going to keep you unheard. And all the things we talked about, like vulnerability builds connection. You got to just do content, do all how-to content, survey your audience, and all of that stuff. That advice works, and it still does work. Obviously you can't do it all 100% of the time. All the stuff can help you, but no one's intentional with it. No one really knows the deeper layers. So, what happens is you get all these gurus who were vulnerable and they just got lucky and were vulnerable about the right thing. They're like, okay, I'm just going to teach vulnerability builds connection. And they're not looking at the layers beneath the surface. But now you know the layers beneath the surface. Now they teach how-to content worked for me. So I'm going to tell everyone to do all how-to content. And they don't look beneath the surface. They don't look that, okay, great, it worked because there wasn't a lot of competition back then. And now there's a ton of competition. They didn't realize, well, maybe someone's following me not because of my tutorials, but because of something else. So you guys are starting to see beneath the surface on all of this stuff. And so what I want to do is I want to invite you guys to register for our Content Revolution video series. That's going to go deeper into this. It's going to walk you through more specifically how to start to craft the thought reversals, how to find the video titles that you need to be doing, or the content titles, how to fix the messaging. And it's going to go in depth. It's a 6-part series that you guys can go get right now. But what I really want you to consider, and what I really want to kind of plant the seed for, is that if you want the video 4X, if you want to see how we fix content and messaging for people like James Wedmore, Jim Fortin, Carrie Green, and all of our clients, the video 4X effect will be opening shortly. The first step for you is to go into the Content Revolution series, get started. But if you're serious about taking advantage of the shift, you're serious about changing what you've been doing because you're tired of being unheard, then you really need to consider enrolling into Video 4X because we only open it twice a year. So click the link around this video or in the show notes, or just follow us on Instagram. The link will be there. Get into the video series and we'll go through it. We'll be answering questions. Get in our Facebook group, The Content Revolution. We're going to be helping you deeper. And then pay attention for when the Video 4X opens up. All right, guys, take care. We'll see you on the next one. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.